authorization to possess more than 6 plants, that clearly needs to be further defined, and I'm not sure that's necessarily our job here, but that's a huge gray area, certainly from the physician perspective, and it's something that I think we probably ought to work on clarifying in concert with the development of this particular rule, or these particular rules. I have not had a great deal of success in trying to get clarification from the various regulatory agencies, health department in particular, on this issue. And I think we may need to potentially look for a legislative remedy. I don't know exactly what the definition here is. And I don't know to what extent recommendations or authorizations, and I mean we need to define that, by physicians are in fact protected under statute, be it either 1284 or 109 or Amendment 18 or Amendment 20. So this is an area that I think both Dr. Bregman and I very much want to appeal for assistance in clarifying this particular.
Yeah, I think there's recognition, statutory recognition for the waiver, and we can just simply refer to it as a change. So there's Jessica?
I guess my question goes to how the byproduct is handled at the end of this whole process, where we have these 6 plants, they have gone into the system, they've gone through the flowering process, now they're going to be harvested and considered as weight. And I understand the whole premise. I'm just curious as to once we've harvested the weight, you know, the general, like most centers are not going to want to take several ounces of byproduct into their center against their weight. And so since an OPC can't sell directly to a MIPS, where is the where is the safety net for that, so that that product doesn't just get destroyed?
That is an issue that is something that we're going to have to deal with, I think, legislatively, because as it is right now, only an MMC can sell to another MMC. It can't go from an OPC to a MIPS. Right. So that's something I think that we're going to have to resolve legislatively. I don't think we've got it either.
And I don't, if there's a huge harvest and you can only have 2 ounces for each patient, you're not going to save the byproduct. You're going to just throw that away rather than take the legal liability for it.
Jessica, can you define what you mean by byproduct?
Like when you harvest the plants, you would trim the outer leaves, the inner sugar leaves, what some people would make hash with. But I think this, the center wouldn't necessarily be able to use that to make hash with in that case, because it would still count as weight against the MMC at that point, once it was the byproduct of the harvest. So I see some fundamental issues there that I think may be questionable.
Okay, Barb?
And I don't want anything to get thrown away. And I can cook with.
Thank you for bringing that up. We actually went back and forth a lot on that topic in just how we set up the regulatory model of how we saw inventory working so that we could account for statutorily what needed to be accounted for and the reality of the industry. Right. I think as we get into describing the accounting and inventorying of the cultivation, manufacturing, distribution process, some of that will be accounted for. For example, you said if you wanted to throw something away. And how we've discussed, I think, is we've talked about the idea of waste, byproduct, and flowers, right, if you want to put it that way. There are times when you might put something into byproduct and it end up being waste. And as long as you account for it, there are ways to do that. So that, I think, is going to get defined a little bit more specifically as we go through the specifics of that accounting and inventorying process. But we have accounted for them, and we're working on that on top of the idea that not statutorily, that we're hoping to go back to the legislature and get a little help on that, both on it makes sense not to have to account for that weight into the center if you're then moving it, and on a safety perspective, and we're hoping for support really from the entire committee. We've talked about this from a safety perspective, to bring weight in from your OPC into your retail space, a large amount of weight if you are wholesaling, a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, and to do those kinds of transactions in the same facility or in the same location where you have your patient contact. Whereas when you have a cultivation or manufacturing facility that is accounted for, regulated, there's security, it would make sense to be able to have that kind of transportation occur from the actual cultivation or manufacturing facilities to the next one, rather than actually taking it through the retail model on a safety perspective as well.
I have a follow-up statement, which is that I can see how the 70-30 rule would also impact the byproduct if that counts against weight, because in a good harvest, 30% of your weight could be byproduct, which then you could just sell and keep 100% of the harvest by technical, understanding or interpretation of this. But I don't think that's the intention, and I think that is, because we're a separate industry, is something that concerns me.
Okay, Brian?
And I think, all of us that have been talking about this agree with you 100%. And what we've done, since we have so much stuff that we're trying to organize, is we've said, look, we're going to identify that as something distinct, and then later deal with the rules for that as we work on the production for the actual product that's going to the MMC. So we've opened the door to address that already, and we all see it there.
Well, I also see the fact that if you're an MMC and you have a MIPS license, but your weight count was above the 2 ounces per patient, you wouldn't even be able to transfer that to your own kitchen. So there's a lot of things that I see with this that, are good, and I understand your fundamental argument, and I think it's based in a good place, but I don't know where it works with MIPS and the byproduct and all of that good stuff. So I just want to say that these are the concerns that I see for people to think about and bring to the next meeting.
That's part of the reason why we talked about this, is cultivation for MMCs with the OPC, because we recognize that there is a significant difference, and we need to address that separately and work with you on that to make that happen.
Conceptually, for me, and I would just say for the record, there is a conflict. The Constitution does say 6 plants, 3 of which are flower and are 50%. But the statute does not provide that. It does say six plants and 2 ounces. There is a conflict between the two, but what Norton has said, I absolutely agree with. We're a statutory creature here. But for purpose of reconciling those 2 issues, I think you're on the right track. I share CADA's concern as it relates to Title 18 and the interface there, but I think there's an easy fix there. The MIPS industry is absolutely, its own creature, if you will. So we'll have to figure out how all of that works. But the bare bones definition of cultivation, I think, is a very good start. Thank you for what you've done. Any other comments on this?
This plant, 6-plant 2 ounce issue, obviously, I think we all know that was a drafting error in the Constitution. It just doesn't match up, and everyone knows that. You harvest your 3 plants, you're going to get more than 2 ounces most of the time. But that is what it is. It's also repeated in the statute. I've been in court probably 100 times, butting heads with district attorneys and cops on what is a plant, what isn't a plant, and it is a difficult definition. So I commend this group for struggling with that issue. That is not an easy solution. I think we should be explicit in here about, that clones are not plants until they start producing something, because really they aren't. I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, they're a piece of another plant that's broken off. So it's not really a distinct plant for quite some time, and I think this should spell that out. And I think maybe we should spell out that male plants are, don't count either. My understanding is that the male of the species, like in many other species, is pretty much worthless.